Welcome! We have an exciting live today. We will be talking about how toxic marriages can impact children and how to overcome the damage. I'm Beth Miller. I am a marriage coach and founder of Soulify Wellness, and I help women who are on the verge of divorce. So hop on over to my bio if you want some free things. There's a great guide there called 3 Ways to Save a Marriage. So in the meantime, we will be talking about how to overcome the damage that can impact children when they are experiencing or witnessing a toxic marriage. And who's going to be joining me today? We have Jillian Hamilton. She'll be joining about infidelity. It's called Cheating When Love Lies. And this podcast is amazing. It features raw and real interviews of cheaters, betrayed partners, and affair partners. And so I'm just letting Jillian in now. Yep, she's joining now, it looks like. So she should be popping in a second. And she's got some exciting stuff happening this fall, and she'll be hosting some live events that will speak directly to the countless men and women who often don't have a forum, don't have a place to really talk about what they're experiencing. So Jillian, you should be in. It says you've joined, whether you need to request to join again. So try again, see if you can go request to join. There should be a button there. And then in a moment, we'll welcome Jillian. But we're going to be talking about one other thing here, that parents really can worry about their kids. Like, you know, you're in a toxic relationship, but you can't get out of those patterns. But you're also worrying not just about your marriage, but also about the impact that it has on your children. It says you're unable to join. Okay, request again. There we go. Request, go live. So I just went go live. Just be patient here while we get her in. But often it is complex, right? Because you're worrying about your kids, you're worrying about your marriage, and we're going to talk about that today. Jillian, you're here.
Yeah, great. Okay.
You made it in. I love technology, right? It's so stressful sometimes in the moment, but welcome.
Thank you. I can't see that I'm in, but I trust you that I am.
Yeah, so is there anything you want to add? I just shared a little bit about your amazing podcast.
Thank you.
And you're going to be doing some live events in the fall. Is there anything you want to throw in there right now before we hop in and really talk about how to overcome toxic marriages and the impact on children?
Okay, I did miss your intro for my technical issue there. But yeah, on Cheating When Love Lies, Beth, you're often a guest, being so helpful to predominantly women who have unfaithful spouses and husbands. And we also talk to men. We talk to affair partners as well. So it's a great opportunity to hear about infidelity from all points of view. And it's been extremely enlightening and so rewarding to have people speak so openly and truly about their experiences with infidelity.
Yeah, I agree. It is a phenomenal platform, and a lot of women, it's getting some great traction. I hear a lot of women that are feel so alone. They feel so alone, and they can find your podcast and they find another community of people that are experiencing what they are. So let's hop right in. Let's hop right into it. So let's just start off nice and easy. What types of toxic relationships do you see out there? I'm going to share a few in a moment, some that may surprise our listeners, but what types of toxic relationships are you seeing? Examples, friends, just some general categories.
A major one, and I just had this conversation this morning walking my friend's dog, gaslighting. I think gaslighting is extraordinarily toxic, and for people that don't know what that is, it's when your spouse or partner tries to convince you that what has happened, what has been said, what has occurred in the relationship didn't. So you're constantly put up in this sense of, is this true? Am I really in my reality? It's very confusing and very debilitating because you don't know what's true and what's not.
Yeah, absolutely. I have some other ones in here too. Gaslighting was actually on my list, like gaslighting, feeling controlled. Basic ones that I think most of us know about is abuse. Like, we're talking verbal abuse, physical abuse.
Yes.
One that we can throw in there too is also financial abuse, when one partner takes control of all the money and they won't share.
Yes.
You and I know this one quite well. Betrayal, infidelity, broken trust. Massive one. Anything you want to add to that one?
It's so hurtful, and it happens on both sides. People tend to think that it's happening to women, but it absolutely happens to men. I can think of one episode in particular with a gentleman named Grayson, who was so gracious enough, Grayson, to come on twice, and he talked about how his fiance was cheating on him 2 weeks before their wedding. So it happens on both sides, and it's very debilitating.
Yeah, and I should actually mention, as people are popping in. Feel free to pop some questions in the chat. I'll be monitoring it as we go. If there's anything you want to ask in regards to toxic marriages and the impact on kids. Some surprising ones that are out there. Actually, before I get to the surprising one, another just kind of basic one that we'll touch on very lightly is communication. When kids witness like passive aggressive or aggressive communication. Aggressive is the one we notice most of the time, but if you, the more subtle one is passive aggressive, those little comments. And with kids, the thing is, the words matter, but they don't actually matter that much. When it comes to communication, if it was a big pie, only 8% is the words. Communication is predominantly the body language, and kids are so sensitive, they pick up on the body language. So often they'll be able to recognize, even if there's no word said. So that passive or shut down communication, it's like 55% of communication to them. And the other part is tone. Tone's in like the 30%, but the kids pick up on it really easily.
And then silence. What communicates more than silence? You know, we hear about no contact rules, silence, silencing someone or being silent yourself is so passive aggressive, so hurtful. It really shuts the other person down and creates such a hostile environment, particularly for kids.
Yeah. Some surprising ones that I wrote down that people don't always think of as toxic, but they really are. Like, even if like your partner isn't supporting you, if you find like, or you're not supporting your partner. So comments like not like respecting them or giving them, like if they ask for help, like not respecting them in those capacities and not supporting them is a big one. So when your kids see you not being friendly, kind, supporting your partner, that could be a toxic behavior. Another one I have here is anxiety. If you're around parents that are quite anxious, that also falls into, they can feel the anxiety of the marriage.
Absolutely. Anxiety, it's pervasive. You know, it affects you. It creates an element of stress in the home. And, you know, kids can feel it. I just finished a story actually that's coming out next week. And the daughter witnessed the husband or father hiding his affair partner in the home, and she would journal about it. So she didn't talk about it with her parents, neither her mother nor her father, but she held that all unto herself, and she had so much stress and anxiety. And thankfully she was able to journal about it, but it was very, very difficult. It was extraordinarily stressful.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to that one. That one isn't out yet, right? That one comes out in a couple of weeks.
That one, we did that just a few days ago, so it's coming out very shortly.
Excellent. All right, another one that's in there is jealousy. If kids can sense like jealousy between the parents or other things, that can be really toxic. What's happening here is you're modeling, and it's hard. It's hard to be a parent. It's hard to be married, but you're modeling, conditioning them so that they think this is what marriage is about, what relationships are about. So if they see jealousy, it is quite toxic to them as well. And again, a lot of that can be passive aggressive. It's not just, I'm jealous of you. Often that's not how we express our jealousy.
Right. How do you often see jealousy with your clients? How does it manifest?
Anger is what it comes out. It's not, I'm jealous of you because you're hanging out with a woman that is not me. I hear it as, I'm so mad at you. Why don't you love me? You should care and respect me more. If you really love me, you wouldn't be hanging out with her. I hear it as anger. How about you?
Jealousy, it's very clear, because once the person has discovered there's an affair partner, it's clear and obvious that there is going to be jealousy.
Yeah. Another one I have in here, drama. When you just start creating drama in the household. Drama is a big one. Instead of just getting to the point, stating what's bothering you, getting to the root of it in a very calm manner, start stirring in other people. Like, my sister told me that you said this, and bringing in gossip and other people's words. The kids can pick up on that too.
And then absence, just not being there. You know, when you're not in the home, when you're not available for the kids' events, for birthdays, holidays. Like I said, I spoke to the same woman this morning, and she was saying that her partner would just be absent. If it was her birthday or her son's birthday, he just wouldn't be there, and she just had to accept it. So being absent, not being present, is very, very toxic.
Oh, that falls into my last one. So my last one is empty promises. So that's kind of similar to empty promises, but it can also be empty promises to say, if you see the father saying to the mom, like, I'll give you flowers for your birthday, or, you know, we'll spend more time together, or I'll be nicer, I won't yell at you next time. The kids can see that dad says he's going to do things to better the relationship, or the mom says she's going to do better things. They don't live up to it, and so they're constantly breaking promises. That can create that's a toxic marriage the kids are also observing. Anything else you want to add to different types? Because I have one more if you don't have any.
one more. You go, and then I'll add
Okay,
one more.
well, John Gottman, he's the Gottman Institute. He's one of the like gurus when it comes to research and marriage. He says the number one is contempt. And so in terms of his like years of research, he would say contempt is like the number one indicator of a toxic marriage, but that a marriage could end or that there's major marriage troubles.
I think that's something that a guest once told me that I found really interesting was it's not about being compatible and having the same likes. It's about the compatibility of your dislikes. Like, does the worst in you jibe with the worst in me? Are your worst moments palatable? Are my worst moments palatable? Because when everyone's happy and getting along and we play tennis together, play golf together, it's easy. It's about identifying how your deficits can align and if they can align at all.
That's a powerful one. I like that. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Let's roll into why the things, the traits that we just talked about, why are they even happening? So why is jealousy being infused, insecurities, broken promises, like bad communication? Why is this even happening in toxic marriages? And on the surface, we can see it, but down deep, there's a lot of root issues. And I like to talk about emotions. A lot of these emotions, behind all these emotions of anger, sadness, fear, jealousy, there's usually deep-rooted beliefs. And these deeper rooted beliefs are often things like, I'm not enough. And so instead of just explaining that you're feeling insecure, you might be asking your partner over and over again, do you really love me? Or why don't you do this for me? Or nagging and criticizing. Behind every criticism and nag is usually a want and desire. But let's talk a little bit about why toxic marriages even happen.
First, I think people can start prematurely, right? Maybe you're too young, or you haven't had enough time together, or you've had a long distance relationship and you've only experienced each other in the best of circumstances. But when it comes to the day-to-day practicalities of relationship, it becomes something very, very different. So I think time is an important factor in having the chance to witness a person in many different lights.
Oh, I love that one. I didn't do prenatal classes. Not prenatal, sorry, that's babies. I did prenatal, pre-marriage. We didn't do that. I wish we had. There's like, I want to give my kids a book before they get married. I'm like, here's the checklist. You need to go through all of these things. Plus your partner needs to like have worked on this, and this within themselves before you're allowed to marry them, before you have my consent. Because there's just so much that we don't know. It's like in high school, there should be a course on this is how you pick a good partner.
Right. Well, what did you find out about your husband that you wish you had known before?
What did I find out about myself? I don't think I had very good expectations. I don't know. Like, we probably should have talked about money more and like what our spending habits were. We talked about kids and we wanted kids, but like how to argue right. I don't think we knew how to even do that, how to resolve conflict. We both had our parents' dynamics. My household was very quiet. And it's good that it was quiet, but I almost think that there wasn't enough chatter. Like, they probably should have talked about more issues. Then my husband's was very colorful, lots of language flying around. He had a big family. There's 6 siblings in that family and all kinds of like stuff happening. So I think I just thought my style was right and he probably thought his style was right. So he's very opinionated, very confident, which was attractive to me, like opposites attract. I was very shy. And so when I started to find myself more in my voice, we clashed a lot. So how to handle that. And we met young. We started dating in high school.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So other toxic like reasons toxic marriages happen. The big one that I see in the work I do with my clients is infidelity, and so often it's insecurity. I think we talked about on one of the podcasts that happy marriages can still have betrayal. Just because a partner cheats doesn't mean that your marriage is actually toxic. A lot of times because go ahead, sorry.
Or that they don't love you.
Exactly. It can be that there's this underlying issue of worth in the partner that is cheating. And so that can lead to a toxic marriage. A happy marriage, that's great, but then betrayal happens because of the partner's insecurity, then creates an unhappy marriage.
I absolutely agree with that. I think another one can be your childhood trauma. What are you bringing to the relationship that you lived in your own life many decades before meeting your partner, in some cases, that you bring to the relationship that has nothing to do with them, but that you need to resolve on your own?
Yeah. Basic ones, like we already know, like mental health, like depression, anxiety, addictions, personality disorder, those all lead to it. Another that's in there is like resentment, like this simmering negativity that can happen between
Yeah.
a couple that isn't addressed. That's like the passive aggressive piece. So I'm trying to think how I see this one. A lot of women I work with, they're like people pleasers. They
Yeah.
give and give and give. They put a lot of people's
Yeah.
needs first. They're either, a lot of times they're the oldest in the family,
Oh,
so they raised a lot of siblings, or they had a lot of responsibility with younger siblings if their parents worked a lot. And so they had this, they were bred, they were conditioned to be givers, and they have big hearts. And so a lot of times what happens is they're used to that. They did it as a kid, but as they have their own family, as they still take care of their parents and their siblings and whatever needs they have in life, it wears them down. They're like giving, giving, giving. Their cup gets emptier and emptier.
interesting.
And they just do that. They want to help their husband. They want to please their husband, but it gets to a point where it's a breaking point. They're like, I can't do this anymore. And it's resentment, and they want their partner to help more, but their partner's not helping. So that can lead a lot to toxic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think you're right. It was very important to state all, the addictive behaviors, alcoholism, drugs, sex. Of course, on my podcast, I hear a lot about that. Men that are addicted not only to sex or not to porn, but just, being voyeurs. They can be voyeurs of Instagram models, or not want to date them, or not want to masturbate to them, but just see them, watch them, follow them. And that's very damaging, because the wives and partners will also feel like, well, why don't you feel that way toward me? And oftentimes it can result in the man losing his desire for the woman that's actually in front of him versus the one that he can find online.
Yeah, that's a big one. And I don't think that's talked about a whole lot. And when I have clients that come to me, they don't often have troubles like disclosing the affair to friends, family. Like, not all of them do, but that's an easier one than if their husband has a sex addiction or porn addiction, or
Yeah.
there's more that internal like issue going on. They don't open up as much about that. That is a very lonely, isolating one, I find, when that situation happens.
Interesting, but because it's not uncommon, it does happen. I mean, you do have, one goes to bed, the other is just awake and, downstairs in the living room, and they have their phone or their computer and access to whatever they'd like to see or experience that can turn them on.
Yeah. Okay, let's go on to any others. Actually, to see if you have any others. If not, then we'll just
Yeah.
hop into impact on kids. Should we do
Okay.
that?
Yes,
Kids.
for sure.
Okay, so when it comes to kids, like we kind of already alluded to, we all
Yeah.
know kids are witnessing, observing, absorbing. Kids are so sensitive, especially 8 and under. 8 and under, they're in very much like what's called an alpha theta brainwave state. Like, they're sponges. We've heard that term. Kids are sponges, but their brain waves are actually different than adult brain waves. And so they're in this like not dreamlike state, but very like free like state that they're taking everything in as either truth, or as they get closer to kind of 8, 9, 10, they start to develop kind of those logical skills, like, does this make sense, does this not? But as kids, they're just taking it all on as truth. And so when they're witnessing a family relationship, that's like, I'm not saying you're messing up your kids, I'm not saying that,
Right.
but you know what, how we undo the things that we've done that we need to talk about right now. So children learn from what they see and what they feel. It's not just see, hear, it's also what they feel in the household. Like, that's a really important point that people don't think about.
You probably have greater experience with the younger kids. By the time people get to Cheating When Love Lies, they're often adults that are recounting how infidelity or toxic marriage made them feel. So I have several episodes where adult children, anything from their 20s to their 50s, are still lamenting how the unfaithful parent ruined the family structure. And they hold that parent accountable for not only betraying the partner or spouse, their other parent, but for ruining the family at large. So that's really damaging, and people carry it with them for years, even decades. I can hear, it was one of the few times that I had cried on my own podcast, because the woman was in her 50s and speaking so sorrowfully about how she felt her mother had ruined their family because she had had an affair with a family friend when she was just a teenager.
Yeah, it's devastating. And
Yeah.
we want to mitigate that. That's what we're going to do today, is talk about strategy to help overcome the damage. So you don't have to be 50 years old and still feeling the pain. And
Yes, from a teenager. I mean, that's a long time.
it is a long time. somehow, like, I truly do believe everything we go through, sorry, is for a purpose. Like, we need to somehow transmute our pain into some kind of growth knowledge that's going to help. And you and I have kind of started alluding to debating on this
Yeah.
one, but like, you can stay in pain and suffer. Suffering is a choice. Pain is inevitable. It's going to happen. So
Okay.
we want to protect our kids and not give them exposure to toxic relationships, but
Sure.
they might have that, and that pain is something they have to endure, but we want to make sure they don't suffer in it. So in a few minutes we can give some suggestions for that, but other things, while they're in their pain, things that the kids may have in pain, we often will see like behavior problems, and this can be adults too, obviously, and teenage behavioral problems, lashing out. They're not sure how to process their energy. Like, I think we've all been there too, like tantrums. um, Adults have temper tantrums too. So temper tantrums is a big thing. Aggression, anger, like anger is like a catch-all for all emotions. Like,
Right.
women I work with, they're often like, I don't know any other emotion but anger. Everything just comes out anger. And they also say, I don't know who I am without the anger. It's like anger covers their heart. It protects them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. With some of the younger kids, I did have an episode where the woman found out that her husband was having an affair with their family friend who was also their neighbor. And so she went mad. You know, she was temporarily a mad woman. She couldn't function. She couldn't cook meals. She couldn't take the kids to their activities. She was depressed. And the kids were observing, you know, Mom, what's wrong with you? Meanwhile, he had gone off to live with his parents and spend weekends with this affair partner. So he's having the time of his life, right? He's got a new love. He feels he's on an adventure. He feels youthful and young and free. And she can't do the basic, you know, functions of what she had been doing for the kids all along. And the kids are looking at her like, my mom, what's wrong with you? You know, dad's fun. Dad's exciting. Dad's great to be with. But you're failing us and we don't know why. And so the kids can be very distraught, not understanding why mom or dad, in some cases, changes behavior and is not able to perform in the way that they customarily did.
Oh, and good on her for calling him out. So many
Yeah.
kids don't even understand that, or even teenagers. They don't have, number one, have the confidence maybe because they don't want to confront their dad. They don't want to make dad mad. But good on them for voicing. Like, that's a massive. That's one of the ways to overcome damage, is to be able to let them have a voice.
Right, to articulate it, yes. Well, in
What?
this case, it's two very young ones, so they didn't understand why mom was staying in bed or being depressed or not being fun or not playing games. But the older one was looking and questioning, why is he always happy, you know, when we're playing at the neighbors, but suddenly she's alone and upset? It didn't make sense.
Yeah. How about this one? Like, in kids, like ways that can damage them. You may notice this more. You've had more teenagers. You have a
Yeah,
daughter, right?
sure.
She's
Mhm.
18.
Yes.
18. So
Hmm.
you've seen the teenagers. What do you see in terms of like addictions?
Oh, that I am not as familiar with unless it's a sex addiction.
Yeah, substance abuse, if there's any like coping mechanism that
Right.
you've seen.
I,
Because that's
I,
another symptom, things that you do. Like, again, it's what it comes down to is there's so much emotion within these kids. They don't know what to do with it. So they're trying ways to like, get rid of it, whether it's substance abuse to numb, whether it's outburst, behavioral aggression, like that's what's happening here. So yeah, do you have anything you want to add to that one, or maybe another point?
oh, I'm sorry. I thought that you meant addiction on the part of the parents. You're saying that the child
Yes.
addictive behavior. That I can't speak to as much probably as you can.
Okay. Yeah, we'll just let it be at that one, because essentially, like, substance abuse can happen is just social drinking, but then taking it a little bit too far because you just enjoy that numb feeling, that feeling of like, oh, it's finally not in me anymore. I don't feel like the anger, the sadness, the depression within me. So that's why substance abuse can
Sure.
spiral into an
Sure.
addiction. Kids, of course, can't concentrate because they're thinking about their parents, or they might be scared to go home. Things like that can happen too. They're not being able to concentrate. And like, yes, sorry, go ahead.
That's interesting, the scared to go home, because you may not be afraid in the way that we think that you're like afraid of an attack dog or something, but you're afraid of the consequences of what could happen if you show your emotions. You know, if you actually articulate and express to your parents, this is what I'm observing or this is what I'm feeling, you're afraid to confront the truth or afraid to upset them. I mean, on this episode that we had just done, Beth, you remember that the young girl, I think she was 11 or 12, she was writing in her diary about witnessing her father bring the affair partner over to their home. And so she was journaling about it and was scared to tell the mother. So she held this all unto herself. and couldn't share with the mother. So she was afraid to share her truths with the mother, afraid to confront the father about what she knew was, incorrect behavior. So she was afraid. And the only place that she could really talk about it was in her journal.
Yeah, we can call that loyalty conflict. Like, whose side
Oh,
do I take? Do I take mom's side? Do I take dad's side? They
yeah.
neither feel good. So loyalty conflict, that's a big one. Because that can create a ton of inner turmoil. Like, you're constantly trying to figure out and dance around, what do I do? Like, that's heavy
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Um, Back to not wanting to go home. A part of that too is, like I told you, kids are teenagers. Like, I can name several examples of teenagers who no longer bring their friends back because there's just a vibe to the house. Like,
Right.
they're worried that
Yeah.
they're going to fight, or that there's just tension in the house. Kids can feel that, so they stop coming, wanting to go home, and they stop maybe bringing their friends by too.
That's unfortunate. That is unfortunate.
Totally. So there's so much stuff going on here. Low self-esteem, we've named a bunch of it. So one of the major impacts that I see, and we've already talked about a little bit, is future relationships. You might be messing your
Oh,
kids up for their
right.
future relationships. And then
Yeah.
that's why they get to come see me, or they get to talk on your podcast.
Right.
So impact, and even with your daughter, she's 18.
Yes.
Yeah, like, what are your thoughts? And, like, do we damage our kids for their future relationships? How do we combat this? What do you think they're seeing in
Well,
your personal situation or friends that you've seen?
what's different now, I mean, my daughter's 18, so she's grown up with it a little less than your kids will, who are much younger. They have a lot of exposure to what they see online and in media. So, as opposed to when we were young, you kind of saw what was in your neighborhood, in your own home. They have a lot of exposure to a lot of different types of relationships through through media. So, I think that my daughter, in her case, she's able to witness all different types of situations, from going to people's homes, from seeing shows online, from chat groups. I mean, she has so much exposure to how people and how families handle conflict differently. So I do think that's a big plus of all the exposure to the internet.
That's amazing. She's very blessed to have that experience, that it's not
So you're
so narrow.
Yes, well, your kids are going to have it even more. God only knows what, technology and devices will be pervasive when your kids get to be her age.
Yeah, I love that spin that you put on it. One thing, like, if we take it to, like, kind of the neuroscience psychology
Okay.
level, kids are absorbing, we talked about kind of the feelings of the
Yeah.
house, but like, so we store that in us if they don't know how to get rid of those emotions. Emotions are energy. Emotion, if it's stuck in them, the anger, the fear from their upbringing and the toxic relationships, that stays in them. The other things they're adopting is belief systems. So just say mom was in an abusive relationship or in a really toxic marriage, they may be sensing that their mom, her worth is low. So as a wife, that maybe you're not significant. So they see behaviors of that. They see that their mom doesn't feel enough, that she doesn't love herself, that she's not safe. Like, there's these beliefs that they start to adopt that then could be true for them. And I find two things happen. You either kind of follow the pattern of your parents,
Yes.
and often will marry men that are similar. Like, there is research about that. Like, you marry, and they also say if you have a narcissist mom, that you may marry a narcissist husband. Like, there's links between who you pick, because we want to almost like redo some of those past things that have happened. So there is history of picking partners that are similar to one of your parents.
Right. They say that you marry your father or you marry your mother, and that you choose those people to resolve the conflicts that you could not resolve in your youth.
Yeah, you're redoing it. So if you
Yeah.
felt unloved by your father, you might marry an emotionally unavailable man so that you can then resolve that and
Right.
feel loved.
Right. That's what I've been told. Again, I'm not a therapist or a psychologist, but I have heard that from my guests, who say that this is what they've learned about themselves in therapy.
Mm-hmm. It's true. It really is. So having awareness is key. Like, that's like a big part of all this is adults who have been part of toxic relationships, is then having awareness of, oh my goodness, I was conditioned to feel like I'm not enough in a relationship, or I was
Yes.
conditioned to overgive. Like, you can look back and see the patterning in your childhood. It's so freeing when you have that awareness. You're no longer victim or suffering. You're
Yes.
like, I can see it. Now I just have to undo it.
Right. You have an explanation. You're not thinking, oh, I'm just crazy or I'm the only one. There's an explanation, and a reason for your behavior.
Yes. Okay. So we have future relationships. The impacts that we can have on our kids are, yeah, the emotions that they're
Yeah.
storing,
Mhm.
beliefs that they've adopted,
Mm-hmm.
And just trauma's in there too, like words you've heard, like picking up on those communication
Yeah.
styles.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything else you want to add, like with your experience in
Um,
relationships and picking things up from childhood and how it impacts?
Right. It does impact, like I said, the adult children. It continues into adulthood. I did have a young woman on, I'm going to guess she was about 25. And by the end of our conversation about how her father had had an affair with a teacher at her school. Ugh, yuck, right? So that's really difficult because kids in the school were saying things to her like, your dad seems to be really friendly with that teacher. And she said that she did observe it, but she was in denial. Again, she's trying to shield her mother from it, so she didn't come home from school and talk about it. But she was continually observing the father with this woman, said nothing. Fast forward several years, she looks at his phone and the woman's sending him a sexy message or something, like the usual flip open the laptop and find out, or the phone. That's your number one way to get caught. Anyway, the end of that story was that she had to try and rebuild a relationship with her father. She needed desperately to come back together with him and find a father, and not just this man that she resented for being unfaithful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is absolutely. And I think three things that can really decide how impacted you're going to be, like how devastating a toxic marriage, witnessing your parents' toxic marriage can be on you, is how long, like the duration in which you witness this behavior for, the frequency, how often was it happening, and what were the support systems like at the time to help you process those emotions and those belief systems that you're adopting and the things you're witnessing. So frequency, duration, support systems can really drastically impact.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So let's talk solutions. We've talked about a couple here, but solutions for overcoming the damage. How do we help adult children or younger children or teenagers overcome this?
Well, Solify
Yeah,
Wellness.
there
Fine.
we go. Yeah, for sure. Like I use neuroscience and psychology to undo the damage, but I'm typically treating and working with older women because we have, like I talked about, these thoughts, the thoughts of I'm not worthy enough, or I can't voice my opinion. Like if you've witnessed
Yes.
communication that was really aggressive, like why do I like fly off the handlebar, sorry, why do I fall off the bike?
Right.
Why do I do that?
Yes.
So there's a behavior you don't like, but we have to figure out what is the thought that drives that action. And it's so funny, we always notice like, oh, that person's really mad, but we don't know like what was this, what triggered the mad. It's the thought. The thought is triggered by the belief, which is actually a neural pathway that's in your brain. It's a pathway that fires a thought. So we need to actually prune, like neuroscience, we can actually change our brain structure and fire new thoughts. Willpower only gets you so far. Willpower, I'm going to change, I'm going to speak nicer to my partner. Yeah, if you keep telling yourself, I'm going to speak nicer to my partner, it's good until it's not good. And then when it's not good, you're just back where you started, because maybe one day your cup's really full, you've had a bad day, you're in a bad mood, you've already had a couple little arguments, and that one just is over the top. And so it still means that there's those old neural pathways that are still there firing the thoughts of like, he doesn't respect me, he doesn't hear me, he doesn't understand me. And instead, we need to create new thought patterns, which are like, I am understood, but I can see not everyone sees my point. I'll keep communicating my ideas until someone fully understands. And so we just have to create these new thought patterns that are supported by our beliefs, which is often like, I'm worthy enough, I am good enough, I deserve respect.
Right.
And a lot of us don't have those deep-rooted self-confidence, self-worth beliefs.
Which is unfortunate. But to answer your question, I do think that whether it's Solify Wellness or other, reputable therapeutic, modalities, I think it's important to talk about it, and to talk about it with a professional that can help you find some sort of resolution. It's important also to be self-aware. So many times on Cheating When Love Lies, guests come on, they say, I had no idea that my partner was being unfaithful. And then when we sort of peel back the onion and we dig down a little more deeply, we realize that, yeah, there were some red flags. There were some, things that were happening that could have you question, but you have to be self-aware and honest with yourself. Someone else can draw it out from you in a professional setting, but I think many times we can be empowered to say, I do see a change in their behavior. I do see them on their phone a lot. I do see that they stop having sex with me, and not brush it under the rug and say to yourself, well, what does it really mean?
Mm-hmm. I hear this as reality
Okay.
twisting. And so we all have like a lens, and based on our past experiences, past beliefs,
Yeah.
like if we were to see a car accident, if a car accident were to happen, I just say I've been in a car accident before, it's very traumatic. So I see the car accident, I probably see it differently than my friend who's a paramedic or a firefighter
Right.
because of our own past experiences. And so we can convince ourselves of the story. We can all have different stories. So reality, what is reality? Like we all
Yeah.
have different realities based on our perceptions and the sensory that we're bringing in. And
Yes.
so yeah, same with some of these wives, like they saw the signs, but they're like, no, that doesn't align with my story. We're very happily married. We have
Yeah.
all these kids. This couldn't
Yeah.
be happening.
Yes.
So we can convince ourselves of the story of the reality that we want
Right.
instead of jumping to what we think might be an irrational conclusion that they're cheating, but really that is what's happening. And that's probably what your gut was
Sure.
telling you.
I agree with that. I totally agree with
All
that.
right. Other solutions for overcoming some of the damage, like, especially if it's young kids, like journaling, like if it's like more of a teenager, you could definitely do some journaling, just getting your thoughts on paper. And I know we talked about the journaling and that other, like the girl
Yeah.
in the podcast, she was journaling. That was her method. Art's awesome, also really good. In my clients that have young kids, they'll go to therapy and one day they open up and they'll explain everything. Other days they don't, they're a clam. They're like,
Right.
not today. Or with certain people, friends, they'll open up and other times they won't. And we just have to honor where they're at. If they're not going to open up today, they're not.
Today,
But
the operative word. I mean, they may not today, but they could tomorrow. I think also being occupied, I don't know who said it, but idle hands are the hands of the devil. I know my grandmother used to say that. Having things to do, having an active mind, having activities, if you're not dwelling on, the negativity, it's very helpful. And if you can have some sort of activity or accomplishment or goal that you need to achieve, it can be very empowering. So you're not wasting your time on busy work. You're really working towards something significant and
yeah,
meaningful.
that's on my list for sure. Hobbies. It seems so basic, but it's true. Another
Yeah.
place is creating a safe space. So teenagers will often retreat to their room, and we're like, why don't you ever come out of your room? But it's a safe space,
Yeah.
and so having that safe space is really important. Um, Back to the kid that won't open up.
Oof.
They might not understand. They really might not understand. They know they don't feel good. We all know our vibe. We all know, like, I'm not feeling good today. I can't name the feeling. I don't know why, but I just don't feel good. And that's okay. If a kid just doesn't feel good, that's when I would do what's called like a somatic experience with them, where I'm asking, like, where do you feel this in your body? You can do this as an adult as well. You know what? I feel a lot of heaviness on my chest right now. My stomach feels sick. And some women will be able to acknowledge, like, you know what? I hold my fear, my nerves in my belly, but I hold anger on my chest.
Wow.
And so where do you,
Yeah.
yeah, they'll know, but some just know they have a heaviness on their chest, or they have like stomach is like feeling
Right.
like nervous.
Some
We've all,
more common. You're going to feel nauseous, or that I know. When you're uncomfortable, you might feel nauseous. Headache, that makes sense. People say I have a migraine if they've been going through something difficult.
and so if you can just identify where you're holding the stress in your body, where you're holding the emotions, that's often a first step. It's just recognizing where it is in your body, because then that lets you go in, and that's, we do have all the control. We can start to heal that stuff, especially if you're an adult. And sometimes you'll take it even as far with my kids. I've asked them, okay, it's on your chest right now, what does it look like? And kids are so
Oh
amazing.
my,
Like, it feels like it's rocks on my chest. I was like, do
oh
you
my
want
God.
rocks there? And they're like, no, I don't want the rocks. I'm like, how are we going to get rid of them? And like, their eyes are closed, and they're like, you know what, a bird's going to come in and just pick them out. And they just have this like visual, and they can feel the energy leaving. It's
Oh
so
my
amazing.
God.
And they're like, what are you putting back where the rocks were? They're like butterflies. And
That,
it's amazing, the power of the mind, what we can do. And we know that the butterflies aren't there. We know that the birds aren't picking out the rocks, but the feelings they have are real. Like those chemicals in our body that create those sensations, those feelings in our body are real. And so sometimes visuals are what get us to help remove
right.
those things.
Yes, yes, yes. I agree.
So what else we have? Creating boundaries, of course, like all that stuff. There's lots of strategies that can
There's a
be
lot.
used. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I guess, like, final thoughts. Do you have any final thoughts for parents, for kids, teenagers, anyone that's either in the toxic relationship or experiencing it as a bystander?
I would say don't underestimate your kids. Kids are sensitive beings. They're watching, they're observing, they're absorbing, and no one knows your kids better than you. You may have 2, 3, 4 children, and each one could respond differently to the toxicity in the marriage, or in the case with my podcast, the infidelity. So if you can be attuned to them and respond to them as individuals, but not assume that because they're on a phone or on a tablet, that they're not sensitive to what's going on around them. And if you're able to address it with a professional within your own family in some way, you'll be doing them a great service, because you don't want those emotions to become repressed. You don't want them to hold all that negativity within themselves, and then they end up, sitting in the chair, 2 decades later, not understanding why their own relationships can evolve because of childhood trauma.
Yeah, well said. And my final point would be, unhealthy relationships, sometimes we stay in them longer than we need to. Sometimes we stay in them in hopes, of that will rekindle the love. We stay in them because of fear of like, do I have to restart? Do I have the finances? Where am I going to go? Fear will keep you there. Also, sometimes we stay for the kids because we think it's best for them to have two parents in the same household. And those are all valid points, but it's a really good thing to really evaluate it. Have you done everything on your part? Like, I often ask wives, do you have one more try in you before they start to work with you? They're like, you know what? I do have one more try. I'm ready to really show up as the best version of me. I'm ready to unpack my backpack that's full of my past trauma, and I'm ready to take it off so that I can really work on communicating with my husband, really show up as myself, really rebuild my self-worth, especially if their partner's cheated on them. They feel like that they're not enough. They're ready to really become the best version of themselves, transform themselves to transform the relationship. And once they've given it all, sometimes they come to a place of, you know what, this marriage isn't for me. It's not supporting me. I'm up leveling and my partner's not coming with me. So I think it's really powerful to really evaluate your relationship. Okay, ideally, yes, it's great to stay together. I'm all pro marriage, but sometimes it's better for the kids, not
better for you
together.
Yeah, better for you too.
Yeah. So I think better for
better.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's about it. Do you have any other final words, whether it's about this topic or where people can find you, any free gifts? What would you like to share?
Oh yes, I would very much encourage people to come hear Beth and me together on my podcast, Cheating When Love Lies. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts every week. Well, almost every week, we do our best to put out a new episode, and we do really see from 3 different vantage points: the betrayed partner, the affair partner, and the person who's been unfaithful. The people are completely anonymized. So if you're wondering, maybe I'd like to go on, don't worry. We fit your voice. We give you a fictitious name. But the stories are so raw and real. You and I, Beth, have witnessed people really just dive so deeply into their experience and what happened. And it's really helpful to people in a similar situation who may be listening. So I would say that, and also you can see my website, which is jillianhamilton.online. Hear some past episodes, learn a little bit more about me, and we hope to see you there.
Wonderful. And I would encourage you to definitely subscribe to the podcast, follow Jillian, like her stuff.
Thank you so much.
For me, I'm at Solify Wellness, founder of the Marriage Saver program, and I have a free gift. It's at www.freemarriageguide.com, and you can download the 3 ways to save a marriage. So with that said, thank you, Jillian, so much for joining me, and we'll definitely have to hop on and pick another topic, and we'll unpack that another day.
I had a great time. It was a great idea. Thanks so much, Beth.
Excellent. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.